It's time for another episode of Espresso Yourself with Chuck. And now, coming to the mic, your host, Chuck.
I'm delighted to have one of our JAG-K board members joining us today. But not only does he do that, which is a very small part of his time, although he's a very active member of the board, Lieutenant Colonel Bryan Gregory is also the recruiting and retention battalion commander for the Kansas Army National Guard. So we're going to dig into that, his career path. Welcome to Espresso Yourself with Chuck, Colonel Gregory.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Well, we appreciate you, your service on the board, and certainly your service to our country and our state, and want to really dig into that, the benefits of the Army National Guard. But I'd really like to find out about you personally. Tell us your story a little bit. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, so very typical, I think, of some guardsmen. I grew up locally here in Kansas City, Missouri. I was born and raised. I went to school in Kansas City and then went to college in Central Missouri State University, now the University of Central Missouri, just kind of saying my age a little bit there. So when I graduated, though, I went through the ROTC program, and that's where I gained my commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And so immediately after that, I joined the Guard. I actually started out in the Illinois Guard, did that for about 2 years, and then I transferred to the Kansas Army National Guard, where I've been there ever since, going on 18 years now of service.
Wow. So you went active duty, how many years were you active duty?
So actually, I've been National
You went
Guard
into the Guard. You've been in
time.
the Guard the whole time.
Mhm.
Okay. So where did you do your basic training?
So it's now Fort Moore. So it was Fort Benning, Georgia at the
Okay.
time. So
Okay.
I'm an infantry officer by trade, and I started out down in Georgia, and then enjoyed that. And then immediately after my basic officer training, then came back to the States with my first assignment. Did a couple assignments there, and then have done the military training that's required of officers after that.
Okay. So just to clarify, you went through the ROTC program in
Mhm.
college. You were then a second lieutenant, so an officer, went through the officer training, and then what was your job, your first job in the Army National Guard?
So my first job, so it's a couple things, right? So there's the military track. So I
Yes.
was what's called a traditional guardsman. So I had a military track, but then I also had a civilian job or occupation. So not 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. I was my first assignment. I was a platoon leader. So I had 40 guys, and we were enjoying life. Again, I was in the Illinois Guard and running around in the middle of Illinois and Camp McCoy at times. Started out as a mortar platoon leader, which is one. It's a branch from the infantry, so it's a specialty platoon that focuses on indirect fire with a mortar system. And so we were out in the middle of the woods and enjoying life and training on how to shoot mortars. Did that for about 2 years, and then like I said, I came to Kansas. And then when I was in Kansas, then I did another platoon leader job, but this was more of a line company platoon, more of a traditional platoon leader job. So I was doing that on the weekends, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And then my actual first true real job outside of college, I worked at the VA hospital. I started out in the clinics. I did that for about a year before I became a police officer in KCMO. And so then I did that for about 7 years. And then I transitioned from the police department to doing the Army National Guard full time. So I transitioned from a traditional M-Day soldier to an active guard and reserve, or an AGR soldier. I've been doing that for the past 12 years.
Okay. And so to go back to your initial training boot camp, my son is an airman in the Air Guard, so enlisted, and they had their basic military training at Lackland Air Force Base. Again, for enlisted, the officer boot camp, if you will, because I know officers in the Air Force, they have their basic military training or officer training at a different location, but there are still the physical requirements and some other differences. Can you tell us what maybe the major differences are between the enlisted, and we're just speaking generally, because we know the branches do different things and have different lengths of training and all of that. But what are the major differences between the enlisted military training, basic military training, and maybe the officer training?
Yeah. So, well, the basic difference, again, conceptually, generalities, like I said, each service and branches are different. But on one end of the spectrum, you have essentially the doers, and then you have management, and where you fall in the rank spectrum, and also your particular assignment will help to determine how much are you doing and how much are you managing. So the very junior, typically 17, 18-year-old private or airmen coming in, they are very much in the doer category, and they're pretty much being told what needs to be done, and then they're executing that. On the officer side, as a brand new lieutenant, and then even the more senior officers, they're typically driving major policies or major activities and managing systems and processes and organizations, and that's typically where they live. And so as a young officer, I was in this nice sweet spot of I'm still doing things because I'm with all of the people who are doing, and so I'm doing it with them. As an infantry officer, I was carrying a ruck and running around the woods and doing live fire exercises and all the different things, but I'm still responsible for managing the platoon and making sure that the personnel are administratively ready, they're physically ready, and that we're hitting the readiness objectives that we need to achieve in order to be successful. So that's a very broad brush of the difference of one's a doer, one's a manager, and then as on the enlisted side, as the further you progress in rank, the more you start to manage other doers.
And as far as the basic training goes, is there more of an emphasis for the officers? I mean, you still have your PT tests, I assume, and those types of things. Is there more emphasis on management and leadership skills in basic, or do you get that in follow-on training after the basic military training?
Yeah, so everyone in the military has essentially, we teach you how to be a soldier or an airman or a Marine, the basic service specific, indoctrination and inculcation of that's how we do things. Then there's the technical aspect of this is how you do the job that we've assigned you to or that you've raised your right hand for. So as an officer, my commissioning course for ROTC, I spent 4 years learning how to be an officer. Then when I went to Fort Benning, that's where I learned how to be an infantry officer. The same would be on the enlisted side, where if you go to basic training, no matter what it's called by the various service, that first initial training is to teach you how to be in the service. And then right after that, there's a technical school that teaches you the specifics of your MOS or your AOC or whatever the case may be for your service.
When did you know you wanted to be in the Army National Guard?
Oh, that is a great question. So I've always known that I wanted to be in the military. I have a very, very embarrassing photo of myself as a little kid playing the drums in this camouflage uniform that, on Christmas Day or something like that, my parents love to whip out at inconvenient times. But even then, I knew that I wanted to be in the military. And then as I got older, I realized that there were more intrinsic values that helped me, that supported that decision. Patriotism, love for country, just desire to serve, to do something better. And then when you start talking about benefits, that was also, attractive because, they were given a scholarship to pay for college. And so that was obviously reduced a burden to my parents. So these are things that just made the decision even easier. But I always knew that this is something that I wanted to do.
Great. And I want to talk about how you got into your current position, but just one more detail maybe on the ROTC path.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of benefits were there? So at that point, you knew you wanted to be an officer. You went through ROTC. What does the military pay for at that point? Is it later? And then with the Guard, there are state and federal benefits. So can you explain that process? And was that you wanted to be in the military, but did the benefit side of it help make that decision for you?
Right. It was. I mean, so there are a multitude of options of how you join the military. So once you decide first your service of choice, then you have to decide how do you want to serve within that particular service. And so I had an opportunity to enlist. That's something that I initially wanted to do. So I actually enlisted first. But then while I enlisted, I was recruited by the ROTC program, and they told me, hey, here's an opportunity where we can pay 100% of your tuition. Also, they gave me a monthly stipend, and then I qualified for a books scholarship, room and board scholarship, actually. And so essentially, my college was free for my 4-year time period. And then plus they were paying me to go to school. So it was a very hard deal to turn down. And so that, that kind of led me the officer route versus staying on the enlisted side. Plus, like I said, I got to stay close to family because I was about 45 minutes away from family. So I was close enough to family, but I was still doing my own thing and not being a burden to them. And then the ROTC program in general, again, the Reserve Officer Training Corps. I was in the JROTC program in high school, so I kind of left that piece out. That again, I was already going in that direction. Not everyone from JROTC joins the military, but it was something that I knew I wanted to do, so I was involved early.
And if I'm correct, and obviously if you're in a JROTC program, doesn't that rank you up or give you an advantage if you then go ahead and become regular military?
It does. It does. So there's a couple of different ways where you can have like an accelerated promotion initially when you enlist, but also even right before you go to your basic training. So there's some people, for instance, they're Eagle Scouts, so that'll give you some promotion points. We have referral programs that will help you gain a promotion. But in this case, yes, I was in JROTC for 4 years. And so that enabled me to, instead of coming in as a private, I came in as a private first class. So, that, again, a couple extra bucks in your pocket, you have a little more rank. They just respected the fact that I knew my rank structure. I knew how to march. And these are things that they didn't have to teach me. And so they're paying you and recognizing the proficiency that you have coming into the service.
Great. So tell us about how you became the battalion commander for recruiting and retention. What was that path? When you were a police officer in Kansas City, Missouri, were you thinking, I really want to be battalion commander for recruiting and retention?
No, I did that. That's not how it started. I will say that. So I was selected. So we have a centralized selection panel that determines who are going to take command for various organizations and units. And so, this was in the making. Like I said, I'm an infantry officer by trade, and so I've done all of the jobs that one would need to do in order to prepare yourself for battalion level command. But then the various selection for which battalion is determined by the organization. And so I think that they recognize that, I do have a love for helping people get from point A to point B. I think that the organization recognizes that, I want to win, and recruiting is a very objective standards type of organization, but it's an organization that it's very geared towards people, and so I care about people. The Army in general is a very people focused service because people are our main weapon system. And so I think that they recognizes that I had the aptitude and the skill sets that would be necessary to be successful in this assignment. And so, they gave me the opportunity, and I'm ecstatic to be here.
Great. And how long have you been in this current role?
I've been in this current role for about 16 months now.
Okay. Okay. And I assume there's some additional training that goes into that once you've been tabbed as the battalion commander, or, I mean, you had your body of work and you've done all of the prep experiences, but then just on, specific.
Absolutely. It is. So I'm used to the other end of the Army. So I'm used to employing the sons and daughters of America, and the readiness that's being developed. I'm used to being in charge of managing that aspect of it. Now I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where we're taking the raw material of a civilian and we're bringing them into the organization, and we're recruiting, training, and retaining the future force of the Kansas Army National Guard. So that's a whole new aspect of the military that I haven't experienced until now. And it's one of the things that I'm really grateful for of my 18 years is, even though I've been in the military for 18 years, I've actually had probably 35 different jobs, because there's multitude of different assignments that you go back and forth, and every year it's something new and there's a different challenge. And so it helps me get up every day because it's always something new.
I don't know if this, I mean, I assume someone knows this answer, but how many jobs approximately are there in the Army?
Yeah, the Kansas Army National Guard has over 130 different MOSs. So these are military occupational specialties. So we whatever job you can think of on the civilian side, most likely we have an equivalent or something similar or a component of it in the military, because that is essentially what we have to do. Is when we're talking about employing this readiness, we literally have to go into austere conditions, and we have to establish all life support systems. So if you're a plumber, we need plumbers, because we need to build camps and have plumbing. We need welders. We need mechanics. We have cooks. We have people who man unmanned aerial aircraft for drones. We have radar specialists, communications. It's not just simply. Again, I'm an infantry officer by trade, but there's a lot more to the Army than the infantry or the armor.
I think some folks lose sight of that. Over 130. Is that what you said?
Over 130, yes.
Wow. So how do you find people? And because not everyone is qualified to be in the military, there are certain standards, and you need to have a lot of folks filling those 130 plus, MOS as a spot. So I assume that's your job, or at least managing the people that are out doing that. What are you looking for someone who can be successful in the Kansas Army National Guard or the United States Army?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we're looking for proud Americans, because our job is to fight and win our nation's wars. And so we want people who are willing to defend our way of life, and are willing to stand up against the enemies of our nation. And so how we get there and what role you play within that fight, it depends on the individual. So whatever your aptitude is, or whatever your interests are, we can definitely find a hole for them, or plug them into a role. But first and foremost, we need people to understand and are willing to raise their right hand to defend this nation. Freedom isn't free, and every generation we have to have another crop of folks that are willing to sustain this great experiment we call democracy, and to keep the republic going.
In a former job I had, people would talk about reinstating the draft, and the military position at that point was, we want people to be here who want to be here.
Right.
And that makes us a more lethal force. That was at least the thinking at that time. I assume that hasn't changed.
No, it hadn't changed. And honestly, I think that the evidence bears it out. I mean, we've just recently hit the 50-year mark, the 50-year anniversary of the all volunteer force. And I think over the past 50 years, we have shown that we have a more capable, stronger, more intelligent, competent Army, and as well as all the services that we've had over the past 50 years. And I think that's because that we've had an all volunteer force. There's nothing that beats stronger than the heart of a volunteer.
And I won't get you into the guard versus active argument, but I have well, first of all, the training is the training. You're in the United States Army, and you're going to basic training,
Yeah.
and you're learning how to do the job. It doesn't matter if you're doing it 7 days a week or 1 weekend a month. You're doing the job. You're doing the training. What I've been told, and I think there's research to back this up, that oftentimes guard units are more proficient at certain activities because of their private sector jobs and their experiences outside of the military. There's this moniker of the weekend warrior. I'm not sure people appreciate that it's the same rank, it's the same work, and in many cases, because of those private sector experiences, they're more prepared for serving.
I think you're absolutely right in many ways. All the service have different things that they bring to bear. We talk about the joint force, right? So when you talk about Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, the Guard, we use inter-service, interagency partners. We all bring something to the fight. And then so when you talk about the active versus Guard, it's a great almost like sibling rivalry. We can poke at each other. We make fun of each other in a playful way across the services. But what I was getting at is we all have a part to play, and we all have a role that we the quality service that we bring to the fight. And so when I look at my active duty counterparts, I'm grateful for what they bring to the fight, because they do have a lot of proficiency at a high end collective level of training and proficiency. The National Guard that you were alluding to, I think we bring unique experiences. So, there is a playbook, there's an Army way of doing things, but because of civilian education, work experience, there's an opportunity where you can be a plumber in your military career, but on the civilian side, you can be a firefighter, and then you can bring those experiences to problems when we're deployed, that if you, for instance, have been a plumber your entire life on the active side, you just may not have had that opportunity to have that experience, and therefore you can't bring some of those solutions to problems. So I think that's just a unique competitive advantage that we have with the Guard, is that we talk about live here, serve here, and work here. Is that we have that dual aspect of both. We are a soldier, but we're citizen soldiers. We have a life outside of the military, and it complements and sometimes enhances what we do in the military.
What is your typical day like? And I know typical is probably not accurate, but just kind of generally speaking, if you took your whole week together, what would an average day look like?
Yeah, so my typical day probably falls into three buckets. I talked about being a firefighter here in a minute. There's a little bit of firefighting. I'm putting out fires, dealing with issues, because we are dealing with the applicants, and sometimes folks are going to MEPS, and sometimes there's some issues in the application process that need some attention. I would say another bucket is senior leader engagement. So I'm working with other leaders talking about some policy initiatives, different things that we need to do to kind of work on what's recruiting. And then I would say the third bucket is actually just, in the business, so to speak, of, interacting with recruiters in the field, going to check on facilities, because we have, for instance, we have recruiters in 38 of our armories around the state. We have 6 storefronts, and then we have coverage for all 105 counties for the state. And so we are your guard. We are everywhere, and we have a promise to the public of always being ready and always being there. And so a part of that is checking on our folks and making sure that they have what they need to be successful. And then supporting them, whether it's if they're at an event, if they're at a school, if they're in an engagement, just being there for them in that regard.
And we talked a lot about the kind of the federal mission, but you mentioned that you're our guard. So there's a very important state mission with the Kansas National Guard. Can you tell us maybe about, you mentioned, well, let's say there's a tornado. I mean, this happens clearly in Kansas. How does that work? So if you're in the National Guard, you're doing your private sector work, and a tornado wipes out a community, what happens at that point?
Yeah, so we are a partner with the state government in Kansas, and so our tag, General Vernerde, not only is the adjutant general or tag for the state of Kansas, but he's also the director of the emergency management department for the state of Kansas. And so there's a whole apparatus on that side that's tied in with FEMA, and works with local agencies and firefighters and police officers and county officials, for if there is a disaster or if there's an issue, then there's a full apparatus there that supports disasters. When local officials exceed their capacity to respond, then many times they ask for partners to help them out, and so we are one of those partners. There's emergency management compacts, not only with us, but with other states. So if we need to bring in other people from other states, other guardsmen from other states, we can do that as well. But everything that you can think of, from flooding to wildfires that happen typically every year, that we provide assistance to local officials for. It can be probably some of the things that people most realize are recent was both the COVID response. So we distributed meals, and we packaged a lot of resupplies in support of that. And I know we put together over 100 meals in support of Kansans during that period of time. Also, very recently, we were a part of many states that responded to the Capitol during January 6th to help to secure infrastructure in our nation's capital, and so we sent some folks there, and then we have other things that are kind of like ongoing always. We have the counter drug program that we provide, that works with local officials to help interdict drugs and drug trafficking within the state. Again, at the end of the day, when we talk about we are your guards, we are your guardsmen, and we are your guard, is we're helping Kansans be safe and secure in their homes, and making sure that if something happens, that we're there for you.
You mentioned that there's really probably a job for every interest. If I'm a high school student, I'm not quite sure what my interests are, or what I might be good at. Tell us about how I can be assisted by the Army National Guard, even if I'm not even considering a military career.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to take the ASVAB, right? So the Army, the Battery Vocational Aptitude Test, that is a test that we provide, that all the services provide to help you understand, well, what is your aptitude? Are you more mechanically inclined? Are you more with math reasoning? Is your reading comprehension, extremely high? It helps you understand essentially, where are you pretty much best suited? And then the results of those tests are compared to the various jobs that we have within the service. And then we can tell you, hey, you're more compatible with this. You have a stronger aptitude to do this type of MLS. And then that gives you some options to choose from what you want to do in the service. And then also, some of them are tied to bonuses. Some of them are tied to additional incentives. And so the higher you score, the more bonuses or incentives that you can receive.
So I take the ASVAB. I do decide that, oh gosh, I can get my college paid for. This is a great deal, health benefits. I can serve my country. I can serve my state. I want to go into the Army National Guard. What's the next step for me then? If I'm a senior in high school.
Yeah. So the next step would be to talk to a recruiter, because again, we have 38 armories all across the state of Kansas. And so depending on where you want to go, so maybe you're in high school and you want to go to college in Kansas. Well, Kansas offers 100% tuition assistance for any institution in the state of Kansas. And so where you go to high school may not be where you're going to go to college, but maybe we can tie you up with a unit that's close to the university that you want to attend. And so making it easier for you. So when you are doing your drilling on 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, you're not driving halfway across the state to fulfill your military obligation.
And then what if
But the first thing I would say is talk to a recruiter.
Okay,
Sorry,
talk to a recruiter. And this is just based on my son's experience. He felt like the Guard, and I don't want to, he felt like the Guard recruiters were the most upfront with him about his options and the realities of life in the military. He felt like you weren't trying to reach a quota and this was actually both Army and Air Guard recruiters, that it wasn't about filling a slot. It was about trying to figure out what was the best opportunity for him. And so I don't know if that's because you're located in Kansas, you're working with Kansans, or maybe it was just a fluke, but it felt like it was really intentional and maybe it's part of being our Guard, that the recruiters really seem to care about my son and his future, as opposed to, I just need to find somebody.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that, because again, when we say we're your Guard, it's not just a catchphrase. It's I live here. My kids go to school here. My family is here. The people that you are talking about that are in the Kansas Army National Guard are residents of Kansas, or are members of the Kansas communities that they serve. And so there's an inherent investment in making sure that, if I'm talking to you, I may see you at church. I may see you or your family members at a softball game or at a baseball game, or wherever the case may be. Is we are a part of the community, and it's not just we're assigned to the community. We actually are integrated into the fabric of the community. So I think that kind of translates into how we speak to one another or potential prospects on the Guard, is because we know full well that I may serve with your son, or I may be responsible or your son may be leading my son, in the coming years. And so we care about who we're talking to and what we're saying, because there's a real impact that we'll see down the road in our service.
And so there are some folks that they want to travel, they want to see the world, and maybe they don't see themselves staying in Kansas. What opportunities are there for students like that and maybe it is the active duty, but are there opportunities like that within the Guard?
There are. So that's a little known secret, right? So it's almost the best of both worlds. So there's a couple of things. One, you can travel, on your own, because it's a part-time service. By definition, your military commitment only, does not prevent you from, let's say, if you wanted to take a gap year between high school and college and you wanted to see the world, you can go for 2 weeks and be in France, and then come back and do your military obligation on the weekend. or even in the military. Because of the military, I've been to Germany because of the military. I've been to the Horn of Africa because of the military. I've had the military. It's paid for my graduate degree program, which enabled me to go to China. So I've had some experiences, and those are just the ones that I've had. There's other people that, for instance, we have a state partnership program with the country of Armenia, and so we frequently send people. I know my executive officer. He's leaving actually, and he's now going on a trip to Armenia to help train the Armenians and provide some support to them as well. And that happens on a routine basis. So there are travel opportunities for folks who want to see the world with the Kansas Army National Guard.
So I mentioned at the beginning that you are also one of the members of our JAGK board of directors, and we appreciate the service. You're on our personnel committee. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, you're very busy with your day job. Tell us why you were willing to be a part of the JAGK board of directors.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the reasons why, and I was actually saying chief among them, is because I believe in the mission. I believe in the JAGK mission. So when I was given the opportunity to be a part of the board, I jumped at it because I believe that JAGK at its essence is trying to help students be better at life and give them an opportunity and exposure to things so that they can be successful moving forward. Well, that's exactly what the Kansas Army National Guard wants to do as well. And so I think that there's just a natural synergy and a partnership there. And so any way that we can help JAGK from the military side is something that I definitely support. But even on a personal level, it's something that I want to do is help individual students be the best they can. Because again, I was that student essentially where someone helped me and someone saw the potential in me and gave me an opportunity. Now it was in the form of an ROTC scholarship, but I am where I am because someone saw that potential and was willing to help me. And so I definitely would like to give back in that regard, and then create the infrastructure to where it's not just individual contributions, but in a real way at scale where we can help some folks.
Great. And then finally, what do you do for fun?
So my hobbies are tied around my children. So I have 3 boys, and then so it's between soccer practice, golf practice, gymnastics, chess. But after that, if I'm not doing that or not doing something related to the military, then I'm probably sitting in a chair reading, or I'm right now it's football season, so I'm enthralled with the Chiefs. That's where I am in terms of hobbies.
Great. Well, Colonel, we again appreciate your service to JAGK, our state and our country. Appreciate the time you spent with us today. And we will look forward to having you come out to some classrooms in your capacity as a board member or as the commander of the Recruiting and Retention Battalion.
Hey, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate the time. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching Espresso Yourself with Chuck. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel and also check out all the videos on our Jobs for America's Graduates Kansas YouTube site. Music for Espresso Yourself with Chuck is provided by Bensound Music at bensound.com. Thank you to our announcer, Kelly Newton, and producers Kim Ferdig and Don Neer.